Picture this, it's 1955, the table is set, the good china is out, and in the kitchen, beef stroganoff is resting gently in the pan. Tender beef, silky sauce, nothing overdone. Today, many versions feel heavier than they need to be, but in the 1950s, this dish was balanced, controlled, and surprisingly simple to make. No excess garlic, no traumatic paprika, no boiling the sour cream into submission. Just a smooth, refined classic that quietly earned its place on dinner tables across America. And once you've had it this way, the rushed versions suddenly feel a little impatient. Hello my friends and fellow Apollonians, welcome back to Apaulo's Diner. I'm your host Apaulo Jupiter, and today we're making beef stroganoff, a dish with a Russian name, a mid-century American personality, and just enough elegance to justify using the good plates. Yes, its roots trace back to 19th century Russia, but what Americans embraced in the 1940s and 50s was something a little different. Creamy, restrained, properly behaved. Not a stew, not a sauce explosion, and certainly not something that bullies the sour cream. This was dinner party food, the kind that quietly impressed without making a speech about it. So today, we're restoring the 1950s version. Tender beef, controlled heat, and a sauce that knows exactly what it's doing. Let's get started! Alright, let's start with the beef, because this dish depends entirely on how we treat it. For this recipe, we're using 600 grams or about 1.3 pounds of beef sirloin or top round, cut into thin strips. Served with noodles or rice, this comfortably feeds 3 to 4 people. If you'd like a slightly more budget-friendly option, you could also use pork tenderloin. It's not exactly beef stroganoff anymore, but it's close enough if you need to save a few coins. Back to our beef. Now here's where things matter. We pat the meat dry and slice against the grain. Thinly, about half a centimeter or roughly a quarter inch at most. Because this isn't a stew. In the 1950s American version of beef stroganoff, the beef was sautéed quickly, not simmered for half an hour until it forgot who or what it was. So we season it lightly with salt and black pepper. Nothing dramatic yet. The sauce will take care of that later. Now we heat 2 tablespoons, about 30 grams of butter, along with 1 tablespoon of neutral oil in a large skillet over medium-high heat. The butter gives us flavor, the oil keeps the butter from getting ideas. And once that's hot, in goes the beef. But not all at once. Mid-century hotel kitchens had one rule when it came to sautéing: control the pan or the pan controls you. So we work in batches. Single layer, no overcrowding. We want browning. Quick, confident browning. About 1 minute is usually enough. Just until the outside is seared, but the inside is still slightly pink. If you cook it through now, it will become firm and stubborn later, and beef stroganoff was never meant to argue with your teeth. Once browned, we remove the beef immediately and set it aside. It's done its part for now. We'll bring it back at the very end. Now, in the same pan, and please don't wash it, those brown bits are flavor. We lower the heat slightly and move on to our aromatics. First, add another tablespoon of butter, and once that's melted, in goes 1 medium yellow onion, finely sliced. Let it cook for about 3 minutes, just until soft and translucent. Not deeply browned, not caramelized, just relaxed. Beef stroganoff in the 50s wasn't about deep sweetness or roasted intensity, it was about balance and control. So once the onion has softened, in go the mushrooms. 250 grams or about 8 to 9 ounces sliced. Lightly salt them, just a small pinch. That helps them release their moisture. Now let's give them time to do exactly that. Stir occasionally, but don't fuss. As they cook, the mushrooms will first give off quite a bit of liquid. That's perfectly normal. They look a little dramatic at this stage. Don't worry, they calm down. And while that happens, a small historical note. The name Stroganoff traces back to 19th century Russia, most likely connected to the wealthy Stroganoff family. The early versions were built around sautéed beef and a sour cream-based sauce, relatively simple but elegant, which is usually a good idea to survive long enough to cross borders. When the dish crossed into Western Europe and eventually into the United States, it evolved. By the 40s and 50s, American cookbooks had adapted it to suit hotel dining rooms and dinner parties. The spice levels softened, the sauce became creamier, the presentation more polished, it became less rustic Russian supper and more mid-century dinner table sophistication. After a few minutes, the mushrooms begin to take on a light golden color. That's all we want. Just a touch. At this stage, give everything a small additional sprinkle of salt. Not heavily, just enough to wake everything up. Remember, the sauce is still coming. Now that our mushrooms are lightly golden and everything smells exactly as it should, we move on to the structure of the sauce. We sprinkle in 1 tablespoon, about 8 grams of flour, and stir through the vegetables for about 30 seconds. We're not browning it, we're not toasting it into ambition, just coating everything evenly and taking away that raw flour taste. This is quiet construction. This is where the flour puts on a little hard head and starts laying the foundation. If you've built a roux base with me before, you know the drill. So now comes the stock. We slowly pour in 240 milliliters or 1 cup of beef stock, stirring as we go. And slowly really is the word here. If you rush it, the sauce will clump together in self-defense. We're aiming for smooth and cooperative. As the liquid warms, the sauce begins to thicken gently. Not heavy, not pasty, just enough body to carry what's coming next. And this is very much how the American 1950s versions were written. A light controlled base first, the richness came later. We let this simmer gently for a few minutes until slightly thickened. And this right here is one of those quiet differences between eras. In earlier Russian versions, the sauce could be leaner, sometimes even finished with just a touch of broth and sour cream alone. But by the time Stroganoff settled into mid-century American cookbooks, it had become more composed, more structured, designed to sit comfortably on noodles or rice without running for the edge of the plate. Mid-century cooks valued reliability. The sauce had to hold, and now that ours does, we season. We add 1 teaspoon of Dijon or mild mustard, not for sharpness, just for lift. We're not changing the direction of the dish, we're simply straightening its tie. Then we add half a teaspoon of paprika powder. In some Russian interpretations, paprika could take the lead. In 1950s America, it was usually a supporting role. Warmth, not fire. And now, for a very era-appropriate touch. We add a small splash, about half a teaspoon, of Worcester sauce. Now, mid-century cooks adored this bottle. It made things taste just slightly more complex than they technically were. So, we stir that in and let everything come together. Now that the sauce is gently thickened and properly seasoned, we lower the heat, because from here on now we're dealing with dairy, and dairy has opinions. So we really go down to a heat that's just enough to keep things warm. Otherwise, our sour cream will turn into little crumbly bits, and that's not the look we're after. Now we add 120 milliliters or half a cup of sour cream, and we stir it in gently. Not quickly, not aggressively, just enough to let it blend smoothly into the sauce. We are warming it through, not challenging it. In mid-century kitchens, this step was treated with quiet respect. Once sour cream splits, there's no elegant way to recover. The texture turns grainy, the sauce loses its composure, and once that happens, it refuses to speak to you. And beef stroganoff was never meant to lose its composure. So we keep the heat low, really. No boiling, no bubbling, just calm warmth. As we stir, the sauce becomes silkier, slightly lighter in color, unified. This is the moment where stroganoff actually becomes stroganoff. If it coats the back of a spoon smoothly, without separating, we're exactly where we want to be. And once it's there, we bring the beef back. It waited patiently long enough. So we return the beef, along with any juices that collected, back into the pan. And we fold it through gently. At this point, the beef is already cooked through, so we're simply letting it warm through in the sauce for 2 to 3 minutes, nothing more. If you let it simmer too long now, it will tighten up again, and we work too carefully for that. So we keep it brief, just enough for everything to feel reunited. Think of it as a polite reunion rather than a dramatic comeback. We give it a final taste. Maybe a small extra pinch of salt, a little black pepper if needed, and that's already it. No heavy cream rescue, no extra flour panic, no last minute heroics. Just a balanced mid-century classic that knows exactly what it's doing. Now for serving. Traditionally, mid-century American beef stroganoff was served over buttered egg noodles. And for a good reason. For this recipe we cook 300 grams or about 10 ounces of egg noodles, just until tender, and toss them lightly with a bit of butter. Nothing complicated, just enough to keep them from sticking and to give the sauce something warm and welcoming to land on. Rice was also very common in the 1950s, especially for dinner parties, because it held heat beautifully and looked composed on the plate. But today, we're going with the noodles. We spoon the stroganoff generously over the top. And notice how the sauce sits. Not running, not stiff, just resting exactly where it should. That's structure doing its job. If you like, finish with a small sprinkle of fresh parsley. That's not mandatory, but very 1950s plating energy. Just a touch of green, the culinary equivalent of a pocket square. Now for the most important part. Let's have a taste. Tender beef, silky sauce, gentle warmth from the mustard and paprika, nothing shouting, nothing competing. It's creamy but not heavy, structured but not rigid. And that's really the heart of the 1950s American version. It wasn't about intensity, it was about balance. A dish refined enough for company, but simply enough for a weeknight. And surprisingly, not difficult at all. And there we have it. Beef Stroganoff, the original classic recipe Americans enjoyed in the 1950s. If you give this one a try, I'd love to hear how it turned out. Noodles or rice, a touch more mustard, or strictly by the book. If you'd like to continue the mid-century journey, you might also enjoy my chicken a la king, another refined dinner table favorite, or the 1940s tuna casserole for something a little more practical and pantry-driven. If you enjoyed spending a little time in this 1950s kitchen with me, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Apaulo Diner for more vintage recipes and traditional techniques. Thank you for being here. Keep your heat controlled, your sauce cooperative, and I'll see you in the next episode.